A series regular. You love it here, James, don't you?
Yes, I do. Good morning, Zivai, and good morning, everyone. Always a pleasure to be a part of Impactful Advice.
Oh, that's very good, James. Thanks for joining us once again. So today I just want us to talk about a very interesting topic around the economic outlook based on the South African GDP numbers that were published recently. So I'm just going to give you a breakdown of the numbers. So the forecasts for the South African GDP between 2024 and 2026 is between 1% and 1.4%. And that actually falls short of the 4% GDP that has been forecast by the World Bank for emerging economies. So it shows that South Africa is falling short by a good 3%. Um, but the most interesting part for me is when you compare South Africa's GDP forecast against the developed countries, we also see that it's also still quite falling behind. The developed countries, the forecast there is 1.7. So based on these numbers, let us just start off with the challenges that South Africa is facing based on these numbers before we venture into what can be done.
Okay, sure. So I think I'm stating the obvious here, but what I'll start off with is that the biggest issue in South Africa at the moment is electricity supply constraints. The country is generating, transmitting, and distributing electricity that is far less than what is required. So because of that, it has contributed to some sectors contributing less or not growing at a level that they're supposed to. So manufacturing, mining, and a few other industries recorded a decline in output as well as revenue earnings during the third quarter of 2023. And this is all attributed to the fact that there's not enough electricity that is being generated, transmitted, and distributed within South Africa. So one of the biggest thing that needs to be addressed is or overcome is the electricity supply constraint. And I think the second thing that's also an issue in South Africa at the moment is transport and logistics. Um, Several port delays which are impacting trade, that is imports into the country and particularly exports outside of the country.
Yeah.
So if we're able to fix, the ports, make them more efficient, make them more effective, particularly the Western Cape, KZN, Durban, and also Richards Bay. I'd say all of the ports in general, they need of an address in terms of improving their efficiency. And in addition to that, once you move from the ports, you move to the rail. So in the rail sector, again, there are not enough wagons as well as locomotives to distribute some of the commodities that are being traded. So for instance, there were coal supply shortages, all a function of there not being enough uh, rail stock to move these commodities. And lastly, with transport, with road transport, I think it's just the cost to transport goods. It's impacting the industry. Where you're supposed to be spending less, for instance, if you're moving your commodities via rail, you're moving them via road, and it costs a lot more, and this in the end impacts the consumer. And then I think other challenges at a household level that are being experienced across the country are issues of increasing unemployment, increasing interest rates, increasing inflation, and lastly, reduced disposable incomes. So this is obviously affects the retail sector. Yeah.
Oh,
So
thanks.
so
Thanks. Yeah.
yeah. So those are some of the challenges that we're experiencing at the moment.
Yeah, no, thanks for pointing that out. And what's interesting for me is how some of these problems are actually linked to each other. So if you think about the electricity supply or the logistics supply constraints, that can actually be linked to the increased unemployment, to the reduced household income,
Mhm.
and the rise in inflation. And I think if you look at things like the fuel prices, I don't know if you just want to touch on that, how it has also impacted this slowed growth, if it has.
Of course, it has. I mean, for instance, transportation of goods are reliant on a stable fuel price, and this impacts final pricing of goods. So what you find now is that if the fuel price continues to rise, it in a way contributes to a rise in inflation because final pricing of products has to incorporate, the transportation costs. And they continue to fluctuate because month on month, what we found is that the fuel price, that is both petrol and diesel, has continued to rise, sometimes increasing by as much as 1 Rand 50 per month as you move from month to the next month. And this, in the end, it causes, prices of basic as well as luxury goods to go up, and as a result, they become unaffordable to the average consumer. And
Yeah.
so maybe if there was a way to probably stabilize the price, buy as much fuel as possible when the price is lower or stable, maybe it could create to some gains for the economy in terms of stabilizing prices and also combating inflation. Because the target is to move. I mean, currently it's still at about 5.1%, the inflation rate, but the target is to move it to between 3 and 4% by the end of the year. And this can be done by, ensuring that some commodities like fuel have a more stable price. And I guess policies need to be put in place to ensure that that happens.
Yeah. And then, is there anything coming out of the mining sector in terms of commodity prices and demand?
So with commodities, I think globally the prices have gone down across a lot of the commodities, and because of that, spot prices are not as favorable as they should be. And with them not being as favorable, mines are not as profitable as they need to be. And this, in essence, results in, like job losses, uh, mining companies being more conservative in terms of their spend, as well as projects that they're implementing and rolling out. And then I think the other thing is there. I think it's a wait and see, Gary, to say let's wait for the price to appreciate, and once the price is appreciated, we're now in a position to possibly, increase our output and maybe hire a lot more people. But at the moment, I think it's not as lucrative a market as it is for, let's say, your energy commodities and your precious minerals. But maybe for your industrial metals, particularly metals that are going into sectors such as automotive production as well as battery development, maybe the prices are good, and that's where probably a lot of the activity is taking place at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So thanks for pointing out the challenges. Now I just want us to move to what needs to be done to overcome these challenges in the short term.
Okay, so over the short term, I think for South Africa, the biggest need or the biggest thing to address is increasing electricity supply. So policy has been, adjusted or shifted to increase self generation capacity. So that's a positive thing. And based on the announcement that were made, I think sometime last year, where the capacity to self-generate is now unlimited, that's actually a good thing. So this obviously will relieve the pressure. It's now project execution to say, are the announced projects being rolled out at a rate that we expect them to be rolled out at, so that they bring the much needed relief to the grid? I think that's super, super important. Is it happening? Yes or no? And if it isn't happening, what needs to happen to ensure that these projects are rolled out? Then, in addition to self-generation, I think there's a couple of mega projects that need to be rolled out. So when I say mega projects, it's just because the supply demand gap is widening. It continues to widen, even though there are some self-generation projects that have been commissioned over the last year. So if we roll out a couple of mega projects with over the next 2 to 3 years, which are supposed to provide some relief through strategic public-private partnerships, that in essence could contribute to a reduction in oh no, an addressing of the problem between the growing supply-demand deficit. And diversifying the energy mix is something also that needs to be taken seriously. So there are some resources that might need to be commissioned, which had never been commissioned and were part of South Africa's energy mix. As an example, I've always said that in the Western Cape and in Gauteng, commissioning waste to energy projects through municipalities is one of the things that can be explored. Malaysia is doing it and they're doing it successfully. So maybe it's learning through twinning arrangements between the two countries to try and see what can be done in terms of diversifying the mix, using waste as an energy resource. And it'll also provide a lot of relief, particularly with the landfills at the moment. So that's one of the things that can be explored. So first, it's increasing electricity supply and then diversifying the energy mix and rolling out as many mega projects as possible over the next 2 to 3 years. And in terms of the logistics sector, again, strategic private-public partnerships around the ports to say, do we privatize them, which is already one of the things that's already being explored. And then in addition to that, how do we bring the private sector into the logistics space, particularly within the ports, to make them more effective and efficient? I mean, let's reduce the time the ship docks, and offloads its cargo. Its cargo gets approved, and I mean, when you pay your customs, and then it's not distributed across the rest of the country. Those times should be shortened. And then increasing rail stock is something that needs to be looked at with much urgency. Because if the rail sector is working, the pricing of goods could stabilize and also, if possible, come down. And so that's particularly your durable goods, though, and durable and bulky goods. If you're transporting them by rail, I mean, the price, fuel price, no, sorry, the transportation cost comes down. And with the transportation costs coming down, I mean, it contributes to more stable pricing, higher affordability, and industries could thrive and grow. I'm taking a look at the other challenges. Combating inflation, again, it's just managing input costs. If we could produce as much as we are putting into the system locally, that could contribute to a more stable price and combating inflation. I think those are some of the issues that need to be looked into to just try and correct what is currently happening in the space and move from a modest to a more aggressive and progressive forecast for the economy.
I know that's great and quite insightful. But what then can be done looking at the long term? Because the short term is always nice, but we should always think about the long term. What exactly are some of the things that can be considered for the long term economic growth?
Okay, so I think what's happening in South Africa is that the economy is not as diversified as it should be. So diversification is centered around finding as 3, 4 sectors that contribute to the economy as growth and progression. So you'll find with South Africa, there's still a heavy reliance on resources and the services sector, which provides services to the resources industry. So now it's trying to, do like a thorough analysis of how the economy can be diversified in an effort to attract investment, create employment opportunities, and make the economy more stable from potential external shocks. So I think the core pillars or the key pillars of a country are not speaking to each other as much as they should. So if you're looking at what is called a national innovation system, right? Government should speak to the education sector, and the education sector should speak to industry. So with industry, what they need to say is that these are the sectors where we feel there is a lot of growth. And they speak to the education sector to say, can you train as many people as possible across these fields so that as soon as they are done with their education, they're employable. And if they are employable, this will contribute to that industry growing and progressing, and at the same time, contributing positively to GDP growth, right? And then
Yeah.
with education, I think with industry and government and the education sector, why they need to be talking to the government is to say, are the policies enabling an increase in investment into the country, an increase in capability, attracting the right skills and resources to come into the country to grow and progress the sector? And also, are they putting policies in place from an education perspective that facilitate the right skills to be developed within the country to ensure that people are more employable, industries are growing and tracking at a rate that they should? And then, in addition to that, the government is also benefiting from things like tax collection, um, uh, combating inflation, offering debt at more affordable rates. So it's things like that where I feel the three core pillars of an economy which is looking to grow are not speaking to each other as much as they
Mm,
possibly should. And if they are speaking to each other at that rate, things will start to change and move in the or track in the right direction. So that's one of the things that I think is very, very important. Then the other thing is, from a diversification perspective, it's learning from other economies. So you will find that the more diverse economies like the US, Germany, and China, they don't rely on one sector or two sectors for them to grow and thrive. There's multiple sectors, right? And this has been facilitated through maybe free market economics. And in addition to that, making it as lucrative as possible for entrepreneurship to grow and thrive. So if policies are put in place that channel that energy where entrepreneurship is promoted, and capital is deployed to the right sectors and contributes to economic expansion, then that's positive. Um, I guess what's very important in terms of economic expansion and diversification is attracting investment, training up the people locally to be able to work within those sectors, leveraging technology. I mean, there's a lot of talk of AI coming into Africa and contributing to economic expansion, creation of job opportunities. But the question that we need to be asking ourselves from an African South Africa perspective, are we ready for that change? Do we have enough people trained to be able to take advantage of the AI wave? And if yes, how do we go about, or if yes, how do we ensure that we fully capitalize on such a wave or a drive? And if not, what do we need to do over the next 3 to 5 years or even 10 years to ensure that we are the direct beneficiaries of AI being incorporated or integrated into economic sectors over the next couple of years? Yeah.
yeah.
And I think those are the things. And then I think lastly, just facilitating more affordable debt because there's a lot of entrepreneurship that's happening in Africa and South Africa. But then the thing is, are we able to scale those projects? And if we're not able to scale those projects, what are the big issues? The bigger issues are centered around debt not being affordable. And if debt is not affordable, it stifles economic entrepreneurship as well as economic expansion. And one of the other things that can be invested in from an economic diversification perspective is import substitution. We've seen a couple of import substitution projects being rolled out in countries such as Ghana and Nigeria. And those are things that can be looked into again within South Africa to say what commodities that are imported into South Africa can we start producing locally? And if we can produce them locally, can we scale that so that we not only just supply South Africa, we can also supply other regional markets. And through that, we create a sustainable program around those imports that are consumed a lot in South Africa and across the SADC region. So those are some of the initiatives that can be looked into.
Oh, thank you very much, James. I was taking notes here. My hands are even painful because serious nuggets that you were sharing with us there. And we really do appreciate your time always.
Thank you, Zivai. And I appreciate being a part of this podcast. And I hope that we'll be able to have more enlightening conversations, not just me, but other people bringing their thoughts and ideas to the fore, which can be implemented for the greater good of South Africa and the continent.
Yeah, we're definitely working on something on the production side. But thank you all for joining us. For more information about Berget and the work that we are doing in terms of helping businesses and industries grow, please visit our website, www.berget.co.za, or follow us on Instagram, Twitter, it's called X these days, as well as we do have a YouTube channel and LinkedIn, all of them at Berget.
So,
Thank you.
cheers, everyone.
Cheers.